When it comes to a team that kind of reminds me of the St. Louis Blues, I think of the Florida Panthers, and I'm going to tell you why coming up here on Locked On Blues.
You're Locked On Blues, your daily podcast on the St. Louis Blues. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On Blues. I am your host of Locked On Blues, Haley Taylor Simon, talking to you all things about our St. Louis Blues. Here, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today on Locked On Blues, I will be talking to you about how we're most like the Florida Panthers when it comes to the two teams in the Stanley Cup Final, one being Edmonton and one being the Panthers. I'm going to talk about what the Blues should do in the later rounds of the draft 2.0, so different names that I didn't mention previously that I want to mention to you today and this week. Does anything else need to be said about it? We all know what this week is. So let's get into a busy episode of Locked On Blues today. Before I dive any deeper, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So right now we are watching the Stanley Cup Finals. Lord Stanley himself once was with us almost 5 years ago. And you have two teams. You have the Edmonton Oilers and you have the Florida Panthers. Now, the reason why I wanted to bring up the Florida Panthers is not necessarily because of this season, but because of last season. So for those that don't remember, the Panthers have been a relatively good team for a couple seasons now. 2 seasons back, they were honestly like one of the best teams in the NHL, and they ended up choking and not really going anywhere in the playoffs. We know all that too well. And then last year, obviously, they made it to the finals and they lost. And this year, they made it. And last year, they weren't so as good as they were the previous year, if that makes sense. And this year, obviously, they were a good team and they made it to the finals. But last year, they were the underdogs. I remember when they beat the Bruins in the first round. Nobody thought the Panthers were going to beat Boston. Two things that us and Florida have in common, beating the Bruins, but nobody thought that they were going to do it. And when they did, it was like this magical kind of Cinderella run that they had, relatively speaking, because they did lose in the finals. However, it really reminded me of us, right? It reminded me of how nobody ever thought the St. Louis Blues were going to get past the first round. They weren't going to get past the second round. The third round, not a chance. And then the finals, nobody thought we were going to make it. But guess what? We did. When I think about resilience, I think about a team that is an underdog. I'm a huge underdog person. And I think that's why I resonated so much with how we won the cup. We won it being underdogs. And all of those years, I mean, you can look back at our history here in St. Louis. You know, we were the President's Trophy winner. We made it to the finals in the first 3 seasons of joining the league. Like, we were a very good and dominant team. We only missed the playoffs when we hit our 50-year anniversary. We only missed the playoffs like 9 times. Like, historically speaking, the Blues are a pretty good team compared to all the other NHL teams. The problem is that we couldn't really get anywhere in the playoffs. So when I think about a team that I'm watching that was labeled, the underdog, even in this round, despite the fact that the Florida Panthers have home advantage, they're still underdogs because everyone's like Connor McDavid. It's always the big names, right? And that's how it was for us too. You had all the names on the Boston Bruins. You had, Pastrnak, Marchand, Zay. You had Rask. You had all these big names that they would throw around. And by they, I mean the media, the people, everybody. And this is the thing about St. Louis and why out of the two teams I resonate most with the Panthers, people always underestimate the team that, maybe doesn't have as big as names. Maybe, they're not like the biggest market, right? People tend to do that. I get it. People are used to teams with really big markets. And I'm not saying that we don't have a big market, but if you compare it to Boston, they have a bigger market, I think. Because they have the whole New England area. But that's the thing. And we won, and they didn't. And at the end of the day, we have a pretty cool story to tell. So when I look at the Florida Panthers, I mean, think about us when we were in the finals, especially. Who was our star? Jordan Binnington. Who was their star? Sergei Bobrovsky. It's the goalies. And I said this from day one. It's always the goalies. If you have a top 5, I'll be generous. If you have a top 7 goalie in the NHL, you pretty much have a good team. And yes, there's cases where you do have a goalie that's one of the most elite goalies in the league and you don't make it to the playoffs, like this year. But usually, if you have a good goalie, you're a pretty solid team. And I'm not saying Skinner isn't a good goalie for the Edmonton Oilers. I'm just saying that Bobrovsky is unbelievable. You also have a couple of our former players on the Panthers, so that helps. But most importantly, and I think about these two teams and why I resonate the most with this one, it's because of two things. And nobody believed in them. Number one, that was a huge thing. And number two, despite the fact that they have names on the team that maybe aren't the biggest names in hockey, they still show up. And I know that we don't have a guy that's like a Matthew Tkachuk in a way, and that's probably one of the biggest names on their team. But you know, I think about a guy like a Robert Thomas, right? And it's hard to put into words sometimes and how to articulate this properly. But a Robert Thomas is the type of player that is resilient. And I get that sense that if you took a couple of the guys from the Panthers, like maybe like a Sam Reinhart that you can compare Thomas to, you can see the comparison. You can. On the Blues, obviously nobody has a guy like Connor McDavid, right? I mean, on the Oilers comparing to the Blues. You don't have the big names, but that is okay. It is okay not to have big names and to be a good team. But I think, Paul Maurice, obviously the coach to those Panthers, he is a good coach, right? And he knows how to, switch up the lines when needed. And that is something that's really important and something that doesn't get done a lot. I think that at the end of the day, though, I love comparing teams to our team, right? And, Bruce Cassidy coached the Bruins, obviously, when we beat them and he was with the Golden Knights and they won a cup. So, okay. Good coaches find success. And that is exactly why right now I have to trust, I really do, that Doug Armstrong made the right decision. And I'm not saying that the Blues should try to get like a guy like Paul Maurice or they should try to get a guy like a Bruce Cassidy. That's kind of ironic, right? Torrey Krug, and then you would have Bruce Cassidy. Okay, I'm joking, but you have to trust that this decision for coaching too is also the right decision. I think that at the end of the day, there's going to be people that are going to like it, don't like it, but I really do believe that Drew Bannister is a good coach. I do. Do I think that he was the best possible candidate? I think so. I really do. Because if it wasn't the best possible candidate, and I'm going to be very blunt with you, why would Doug hire him? He knows the state that the St. Louis Blues are in. He knows that this is a point in Blues history that we don't want to relive, where we just won the cup and then we can't make it to the playoffs. Or we made it to the playoffs and lost in the first round, like the year after we won the cup. You don't want that. So I think that it is smart, honestly speaking, that right now the focus is progression. The focus is the draft. The focus is free agency. You got to shift that focus away from the what ifs of the past because it's not going to change anything. It's not going to change the fact that we didn't make the playoffs. It's not going to change the fact that we had a horrible offseason last year. That none of that's going to change the fact. But what the Panthers did, and this is interesting, and I know the cap space went up, by the way, they were able to add on really good talent and kind of wiggle around that cap space room. So the Blues need to get creative and be as aggressive That is the term, aggressive. Aggressive. All you need to do is just be a little bit more aggressive, and good things will hopefully happen. Let's talk about my friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance: superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only. Available to U.S. customers. St. Louis, it is almost draft time. And here's the thing, when it comes to the draft, I get super, super, super excited because there are so many potential possibilities, right? We all know, oh, hail, the Blues only have, one first round. I get it. I get it. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. And I want to tell you about some guys that the Blues could get in the second round and third round and so on. Because I also believe while the first round is important, it's also important that maybe a second round draft pick pans out, and it is possible, okay? We have a guy on the team, by the way, that, Tyler Tucker, he got drafted in the 7th round. So literally anything is possible. So this is Linus Erickson, strong name Erickson. So Erickson is a left-handed center. Okay. He is the captain of Sweden's U18 team and is an offensive catalyst. Okay. So he's creative in the center and he makes his lines look really good. Great anticipation as well, and really good on the check. Stick handling skills are good as well. And he's good, by the way, defensively. Not as strong defensively, but he's good with the backhanded a lot, with the little backhanded scoops. And the thing about him, too, is he is great value because of his two-way play. And personally, this is a guy that I think the Blues should go after. Now, you might be saying, Haley, they have centers. Right. And I get that. But at the same time, you're not going to have the same guys that you have on the team right now forever. And I mean, obviously, whenever you have a guy that's a captain, right, of his team, it just goes to show that this is a player, he finished with a bronze medal. He's good, right? And I think that's what makes it important too. He can be a little bit up and down in terms of his play. He can stay behind the blue line a little bit longer but at the end of the day, that's just who he is. He's a two-way player. And I think that's what the value is. And another thing too, by the way, is that he's good with supporting his line mates and digging out the puck. And that should remind you of my boy, Robert Thomas, because that's what RT does with his lines. He really does make sure that his line mates are supported. So I think with Linus, the fact that this is something that scouts have noticed, it goes to show that there is a lot of positives, right? He high hockey IQ, skating ability, strong playmaking abilities, okay? Now, things that he can improve on is the consistency, and that's been one thing that a lot of these, reporters have noticed, right? And I've been watching some of the tapes. And again, this very young, still has time to develop, but there is sometimes a very, big shift in inconsistency, not big as in drastic, but just noticeable enough. And the inconsistency, it just comes from, honestly, experience. I think that the more experience you have and more, intense kind of games, you're going to improve on that. But it is, it is improvable. And here's the thing, too. When it comes to, hockey these days, you really do need the two-way players. And I know that sounds silly, but it does make a huge difference. If you have a guy that's a center that's great defensively. I mean, we always talk about, two-way defenseman. How about a two-way center? I mean, that's really valuable. So I like Linus a lot, and he is a name that I want you, St. Louis, to consider for potentially one of our second round draft picks. We do have two, which is fine. Now there's another guy that I like a lot too, Teddy Stiga. And here's the thing, right? He's a left wing. I think honestly, there is potential in him. And here's the problem, right? He's a little bit smaller, but that is okay. And I say it like in a sense of, at the end of the day, some of these players are not going to be as big as we think. He's 5'10", right? I'm saying it like he is one of the smallest people. He's not. He's only 5'10". So in skates, he's still about that 6 foot, which isn't, bad. But again, Boston College, which obviously makes a lot of good hockey players, right? And I also think that with Teddy, he would fit in really well, maybe in the third line. I'm always looking for where players could fit in. And in this past season, he had 61 games that he appeared in, 36 goals, 43 assists, 79 points overall. So I like that a lot. And here's the thing, too. I look at him, right? He shoots left, which is huge. And, right now, you have a Massachusetts kid that is playing pretty good hockey. So you should definitely consider Teddy as well. All right. Now I'm going to talk to you about something that's been heavy on my mind right after I tell you about FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And listen, this is what you need to do. You need to bet money line on the Florida Panthers to win the Stanley Cup. I said it once and I will say it again. This was my my fourth time I made a prediction on who will win the cup, and I was wrong. I said it was me, the Dallas Stars, and I was wrong. But I'm telling you right now that I am so consistent. I really am, and I think that this is going to happen. So let's be positive. You never know. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to happen. So do that. Okay. Hi, St. Louis. Hi. So it's the 10th, which means we all know what's happening in 2 days. And this week, wow, it is definitely an emotional week. And it kind of get a little crazy. So yesterday would have been game 6, by the way, June 9th, where the Bruins beat us at home 5-1. And I just want you to take a moment, close your eyes, and I want you to take a moment with me. We came back being up in the series 3-2. We thought we were going to win at home. We did. We had a great win in Boston, a dominant win in Boston. And all the momentum was with us, St. Louis. We went home. We saw all of the fans at Enterprise wearing the blue note. And the vibes were good heading into the game. We really did think that we were going to win. And we were excited and we couldn't wait. And we lost. Remember that feeling. Remember how it felt. Take every single moment that you felt and let yourself remember the anticipation. The first period, you had Brad Marchand, the power play goal against us. But there was still hope because the second period was scoreless. You went into the final frame ready to fight back. But then the Bruins scored an early goal, and now it's 2-0. They score again, 3-0. Then Ryan O'Reilly, halfway through the third period, is able to get a goal. It's 3-1. Hope is alive. Well, not for long, because the Bruins scored, well, one more even strength and then an empty netter. So the hope was dead. The hope was gone. But then something magical happened, St. Louis. 5 years ago today, June 10th, 2019. How did you feel? Did you feel like, hey, we can do this? Did you feel, I don't know, it's going to go back to Boston and I don't feel good about this? I'll tell you how I felt on June 10th, 2019. Can we just play hockey? Because I think I'm going to literally pass out from being so anxious. I was so anxious and nervous, and I just tasted it, right? Tasted winning the Stanley Cup. I tasted how close we were, St. Louis. I want you to remember that feeling, because for such a long time in our history, at the time almost 5 decades, we were always the team that was so close and we could never finish the job. And that's what made me nervous. I said, "Hale, it's history repeating itself again. Are we really going to do this again?" Because I knew in the back of my head, if we don't win the cup now, who knows when we're going to win it again? And I know you're thinking, isn't that every team? Not really. If you have a really strong team where you know your players, won't be free agents, it may not feel as bad, but I knew what was going to happen to our team. And I think about that moment a lot, because this week, it's a week of celebration. It's a week of joy, but it's also a week of remembering all of it, right? And that's what made our win so special. It really was. It was the unknown. It was the angst. And I cannot wait for We Went Blues Day. I can't wait, because I just want to relive that game. And that's all I've ever wanted to do, is relive that magical moment. Last year when I joined, oh, by the way, this is my 1 year of me joining this podcast officially. So woohoo. So that's exciting. But I literally can't express into words how much I love this team, how much I love talking to you about this team, St. Louis, and how special this is that we will celebrate the 5th anniversary of We Went Blues Day together. Enjoy the week, reminisce, and just remember that we will forever be Stanley Cup champions. And on that note, let's go Blues.